Good morning, I'm Kate Jones and welcome to my presentation entitled A New Framework for Music Therapy Practice with Young Children with Selective Mutism, Implications of a Multiple Methods Research Study. So the aims of the presentation are to present my motivation for my research, to describe what is and what isn't selective mutism, to give an overview of the whole project, but then to zone in on the multiple case study research, and then to talk particularly about the theoretical framework for children with selective mutism using music therapy that came as a result of the research, and to talk about the implications of this framework for clinical work, including trans and multidisciplinary teamwork. So just to discuss my motivation initially, about 16 years ago I started working in an inner London borough, and I was referred children who seemed teachers are concerned about them at school because they were very quiet, although parents would say that they were perhaps noisy at home, didn't think there was anything wrong, and so they were referred to music therapy for an assessment to just sort of see what I could find out and see how they responded. And quite often these children would respond really quickly, engage with the instruments, start singing, and start talking in music therapy. And then I'd send them back to class, and invariably the teachers would complain that they were now very noisy children. And so this phenomenon was really interesting to me. So I started doing a little bit of research, and I found out that actually this issue was called selective mutism. And so then I undertook an MA piece of research, just doing a single case study of one child with selective mutism, and provided them with music therapy. I'm now going to talk about what is and what isn't selective mutism. So just to hope that's not frightening people too much, I'm going to move on now. Some people are very scared of spiders or have an anxiety issue around spiders. And this is very similar to selective mutism, whereby children are so scared of speaking in a particular environment, have a lot of anxiety about a particular environment, that they don't speak in that environment because they are avoiding the anxiety of speaking in that setting. So it's failure to speak in specific situations despite speaking in other situations. It's an anxiety disorder, and sometimes it's referred to as speech anxiety. It runs in families, so quite often a parent will have had selective mutism when they were younger or still has it, but they won't necessarily know what it's called. It's very debilitating and isolating, as you can imagine. So a child, normally be sort of playing with lots of friends at school, can't really do this in the same way if they have selective mutism, and obviously they're missing out on aspects of the curriculum as well. So it can have a quite profound effect on a young child. Children with selective mutism will present with quite sort of flat affect and be quite kind of frozen, and for them sometimes it feels quite physical. Children will often put their hands by their throats, so they feel as though the voice is getting stuck here in their throats. And at school, they will often have problems with toileting and eating. And there are obviously safeguarding and safety issues if a child can't speak at school. It's more common in girls than boys, about 2/3 to a third. And it becomes entrenched if it's not treated early, so it's really important to get in there as soon as you notice it. But at any stage when you notice it really, even an adult, do try and support them with an intervention. And it can result in poor mental health, generalised anxiety, social phobia, poor educational outcomes, and low employment opportunities and social impairment. Whilst at school, children can also suffer from bullying. There's lots of myths about selective mutism. It's not due to abuse or trauma. There's something else called traumatic mutism, and it differs from selective mutism in that there's a sort of a single traumatic event, and then a person becomes mute across all settings. Children with selective mutism are no more likely than other children to have been abused, but of course obviously you should always watch out for that. It's not just shyness. In fact, actually, children with selective mutism often there seems to be quite a loud child who wants to come out. It's not oppositional, manipulative, controlling, or stubborn. There's a quite sort of common myths that abound around selective mutism because it's not a choice. Children with selective mutism are desperate to be able to speak at school. They just can't because of the anxiety. And it's not a form of autism, although sometimes the two things happen at the same time. They can be comorbid. And there's generally quite poor awareness and lots of misconceptions about selective mutism. So part of my remit is really to sort of build awareness of what selective mutism is. So this is the dictionary definition of selective mutism. I've covered most of that, but you can go back and look at that if you need to. So prevalence of selective mutism, comparing it just to autism, obviously a completely different condition, but in the UK it's sort of seen at around 1.57%, in the US 1.4%. So if you compare that then with selective mutism, generally accepted, although we need more prevalent studies, to be at about 0.7%. Some studies show as high as 1.9%. And generally, clinicians in the field think that it could be quite a lot higher. But then working in an inner London borough or somewhere where there's lots of children learning a second language, it can be 3 times higher than that. So you may, in some settings, see quite a lot of children coming through with selective mutism. The therapeutic landscape in the UK is that the main approach is a behavioural approach. And this is set out in the Selective Mutism Resource Manual, which is written by Maggie Johnson and Alison Vintkins. And I really recommend buying that if you're working with a child with selective mutism. CAMS also see children with selective mutism and they use a kind of CBT-based psychotherapy approach. Within the US, pharmacology has been used and really it should be used in combination with a behavioural approach, or sort of to help a child engage with the behavioural approach when perhaps their anxiety is very high. It's not used so much in the UK, but my feeling is that probably parents and children themselves would prefer another intervention if it was effective. So play, drama and music therapy have got a small literature. So a multimodal approach is essential, so trying to build a team around a child that has good awareness of selective mutism, so providing psychoeducation, and then deciding which interventions and pieces of intervention are appropriate for that child at any given point. And SMIRA are our national charity who provide lots of really good information about selective mutism and courses and things. So do check them out and do signpost people to their website if they have a child with selective mutism. So my research question was, does a theoretical framework developed in single case study research explain the process of music therapy across a number of cases of children with selective mutism? So this was my initial framework, which was published in 2012. And this is just this is a summarised version of the framework. And this is what I felt from the case study was effective for this particular child who came to music therapy with selective mutism. So I felt that the musical, physical and emotional social components or ingredients of music therapy were really helpful for this child. Across the top, you've just got the therapeutic process, so offering a space, containing, processing anxiety, having a no pressure approach, developing a therapeutic relationship and playing, and then having a confident ending. So this is an overview of the whole of my PhD, which had lots of different components and data sets. So I'm now going to talk about the questions that I was asking. So initially I was thinking, is there a need for this research? Maybe there's some really good interventions out there. So I did a literature review looking at all the sort of treatments for selective mutism. And then I asked what's been written about by other music therapists, which is a slightly different literature review using some looking at grey literature. It was very interesting. I then did a survey to ask really, are any other therapists in the UK experiencing this phenomenon? and then I had a sort of deeper dive into their experience. So I did some interviews to really find out how they'd done the clinical work and just a bit about that sort of clinical journey. And then looking at the setting in which I was going to base the case studies, I did 6 interviews of different professionals to think about the care pathways available in the borough, and how music therapy might sort of sit within that. And then the 6 multiple case studies were to really test how the theoretical framework held up against these multiple case studies. So multiple case study research is an opportunity for in-depth examination of why music therapy is helpful for selective mutism in this case. I provided school-based music therapy, as it's important to locate the therapy where the selective mutism occurs. And I provided therapy to nursery or reception aged children in a London borough with selective mutism. And they had weekly individual sessions of music therapy, and these were term time only for a naturalistic amount of time, so until such time as I felt that they got the optimum benefit from music therapy that they were going to get. So this is my case study analysis method, which I won't go into in huge detail because I don't have time, but suffice to say that I wanted to analyse the whole of the therapy process, so I did this using some thematic analysis, and then I compared this with the theoretical framework, so it's doing something called template analysis. But I also chose meaningful moments from across the therapy process because I wanted to show evidence of how a child got from A to B in the therapy process. So these are the 6 cases. You'll see that I had 4 girls and 2 boys, which is coincidentally the rates, the percentage rates of children with selective mutism in the general population. And I initially saw 5 children who also had English as an additional language, and then this was pointed out to me that this could be an issue for the study, and could just be seen to be about English as an additional language, obviously. And so I added a 6th child who had English as a first language, and I really feel that having English as an additional language is an antecedent to selective mutism. It's another sort of reason for it to occur rather than being part of the issue itself. And you'll see then from the number of sessions provided that some of the cases were quite long and complex and others were much shorter. So it's quite good to compare the different ones. So I'm now going to sort of really zoom in and give a short snapshot of Tasha, who had quite lengthy music therapy, but then come out and see how the themes came out of that work, and then how the theoretical framework came out from the 6 cases. So Tasha's family were from the Congo. She spoke English and Lingala at home, but her speech stopped at the front door. She had 4 siblings, and at the time that I was seeing them, they were homeless and they were in temporary accommodation in an overcrowded hostel. She was age 4 when I began therapy and in nursery school. And in the parental interview, she played the ukulele in the same room, and she was sort of sneaking glances at me. And she also spoke to her mum in front of me. So her path into speech was that she engaged really well. She engaged really well with the sort of musical aspects and started moving quite quickly into singing and then speech. So it went really well, but then we had a lot of challenges and sort of went backwards for a while. So this was after the long summer holiday. She came back not speaking. Eventually we got the speech going again, and then we did some group work so that she could generalise the speech to her friends. And then we got very stuck because there wasn't very much support within the school to generalise the speech from the therapy setting into the classroom. But ultimately this was provided by a trainee speech and language therapist, and we did some quite intensive work together to support Tasha. So this is just a little snapshot from the first session. And you can see in the session that she's very frozen. She doesn't move at all. Apologies for the video quality, but just listen to the sound of what's going on. Her musical engagement is actually quite good. So hopefully there you can see that she was playing the ukulele and picking out notes and looking at me when I responded to her, sort of sang the same note as her. So she was really kind of musically engaged. I'll just play a little bit of this session. So this is a lot later. She's already been talking in the session, but this is her, just to show her confidence then, using her voice in music therapy, her singing voice. Oops. Okay, you get the idea. So actually, as part of that session, she was almost screaming sometimes, really shouting loudly, so it's lovely. So these are the themes that came out of the work with Tasha. At the top there you've got transdisciplinary working. So that was quite unusual in that I needed to do something slightly differently in order to generalise the work, the impact of the therapy into the classroom, move the speech into the classroom. So I worked intensively with a speech and language therapist, and we provided therapy 3 times a week. So he was taking on some of my ideas, and I was working very closely with him to check what he was doing. And this worked really brilliantly, and he managed to generalise her speech into the classroom and then also into the classroom for the following year with the next class teacher. So these are some of the other themes that popped up in her work, and some of these are also common in the other cases as well. So just to pick out one of them, she externally, so outside of the whole therapy process within the room, there's a lot of other things going on. So I've mentioned that the class teacher was quite under-resourced and stressed. There's a background of homelessness, poverty, parental separation, possible abuse at one stage, and there were quite a few breaks in the therapy that were really disrupted the therapy. So these are sort of contextual issues that really came up as a theme. So from all of these things, I had a map of the emerging sort of key themes from all the different 6 cases. This is just a summary here of the key themes from all of the case studies. So you can see them here. There's the role of oral instruments was absolutely huge and really sort of empowering up the voice for children. Blending in speech and language ideas and knowledge, developing much more understanding about selective mutism, and training up people around the child. working in the environment around the school, doing lots of teamwork. And also the session length was an issue, so not having to stick to the sort of 30-minute sessions when children just starting to speak, possibly at the end of the session, and just leaving some time to really embed that speech when it happens. So from the themes, that was just a summary, but from all the data from the 6 case studies, I did some template analysis, so constant comparison with the original framework, and then revised that framework, and this is the final framework that came out of the work. It's probably quite small for you to see there, so I'm going to just skip to another slide, but really dig into some of the nuts and bolts of music therapy that were helpful for these 6 children. So 6 successful cases where children spoke in the therapy room and then generalised their speech into the classroom. So 6 out of 6 cases were successful. And I felt that from analysing the work, the musical component, so the musical conversations are obviously a key part of being able to engage in therapy and feel really empowered to express and then move into speech. And as part of that, really, that using oral sounds, singing and words and oral instruments was also key. Physical component was really important for some children, so I think this is perhaps linked to anxiety and feeling the need to move. That was really helpful for some of them. And remembering that these are children that were typically a little bit frozen when they first came to music therapy. Dramatic play and playfulness to sort of explore other ways of being was also useful for some children. And for all of them, the sort of emotional, social relationship was very important. So transforming their sort of isolation and anxiety through that relationship, so that they can then harness their inner power that they naturally have and their confidence. This is all enhanced with improved knowledge and understanding of selective mutism. That needs to come before the engagement in therapy, so making sure that people have an understanding of that. And then really engaging with the team around the child and creating a supportive, knowledgeable environment around them. Having a flexible approach to session length and frequency as well, if possible, perhaps doing some transdisciplinary work, and making sure that the speech is then generalised into all contexts. So if you want to have a little bit of a deeper dive into this subject, I've written an article and a chapter and hoping to publish soon the results of the study, open access, so people should all be able to read that very soon. But please do contact me on my email below if you've got any more questions, and if you want to get more information about selective mutism or attend any courses, do check out the Smira website. Okay, thanks for listening.